That when you have something in your mind, or when you have something like an idea or a viewpoint, opinion, anything, but that's okay, that's within your mind, within your own self. However, the way you can explain that viewpoint or the opinion or the idea or feedback, whichever way you call it, the way you express it to somebody else outside, and the mannerism in which you express it, so that the other person or a group of people understand what you want to say in terms of that particular subject or a topic. That is exactly the meaning of articulation. So thank you, Ronak. That is a very good explanation, and we will go through this, of course, this session where you will understand more in detail what exactly we mean by this simple explanation, what Ronak just gave and what I just said. Then let's go to the second part, communication. So can somebody in the room, I think this could be a bit more simpler. Somebody in the room say about communication. What is communication?
The
Anybody?
art of expressing our
Sorry, I am not
thoughts,
able to
how
hear you
well we
properly.
can
Hello.
deliver it to someone else.
No, but that is what we just talked
Hello.
about articulation. How well, how effective, how strong, or that is more of articulation. Then what is communication? It's actually much easier, much earlier step than articulation. Somebody in the room? Don't worry, we will get to the a bit more detail after in the next 2 or 3 slides, where we have more of interactive session where everybody will be able to clearly understand the difference between the two. But before we go there, I just want to have one more opportunity or one more chance for somebody to say a very quick thing about communication. I'm sure you read this word in many of your vocabulary. You even do it almost on a daily basis with somebody when you wake up in the morning, whether it is your family, your friends, your roommate, or whoever in your college. What do you daily do when you wake up in the morning and start to talk with somebody? No worries. Okay. Maybe I'll ask Ronak, since you gave the example of articulation, would you be able to say something about communication?
Yes, sir. Sir, according to me, communication is basically a normal expression of our views, irrespective of the quality, like how well it is, irrespective of all this.
Yes and no. I mean, the reason I would say no is because it doesn't mean that the quality of communication is lower than the articulation, because communication is communication. But the first part which you said is right. It's a much simpler expression of giving a message. For example, okay, I woke up today, I had, say, um, poha for breakfast. And if you tell this to your friend whom you meet in the morning, that is communication. You're just communicating that you woke up in the morning and you had breakfast. And what did you have for breakfast? You had poha or poha and chai, whatever it is. This is communication. So let's now try. So thank you, Ronak. Let's try to then see what are the types of communication, and fundamentally what is articulation versus communication. So as we just spoke, let's do communication first and then we will go to articulation, because as I said, communication is much easier to understand, much simpler than articulation. But before we go ahead, there are various forms of communication, and here it is listed down in the top bullet point. So one, verbal communication. So somebody tell me, what is verbal communication? Quite easy, right? What is verbal communication, students? Verbal
Speech and listen.
speech. So you speak, when you speak and you tell somebody something, it is verbal communication. Can somebody tell me what is non-verbal communication? And somebody, we talked about this a few minutes before in the initial part of the discussion. Can somebody tell me what is non-verbal communication?
Science and expression.
Signs and expression, perfectly right. So when you have an expression with, as we said, with your face, with your eyes, or with some way of communicating with your hand, or a gesture, that is nothing but non-verbal communication. Then written communication, very easy to understand. Written is written. You just write something, even if it's a WhatsApp message or a letter or something, that is nothing but written communication. Visual communication. Can somebody tell me what is visual communication? What are the examples of visual communication?
Video.
Sorry, can you tell me again? Video. Somebody, I think
By
you said
means
video,
of
right? Sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you say that again?
sir, by means of video or visual
Yeah,
effects.
absolutely. By means of video, it means that you are watching a movie, you are watching the news, you are watching something on the web, on your computer, or you're watching on your phone, something. It is also means of communication because you are trying to communicate somebody over a media. In this case, could be through the, like I'm doing today, right now. I'm communicating with you with a verbal communication, yes, but in a virtual mode where I'm on the call here with the video and audio on. So this is visual communication. Finally, listening. So obviously, listening is a means of communication. When somebody is telling you something, you got to listen to what the other person is saying. So that is nothing but listening communication. So to understand a bit more about communication, let's do some simple and fun exercise. So you already see the screen here, so it's not something which is hidden. But I want somebody to answer the question because it's a very simple question. I hope for any of you in the room. So let's go with the first. Somebody in the room, tell me what are your hobbies and what sports do you like to play? Very simple, right? Question. Anybody who wants to go first? Please tell your name and then say the answer. Anything, anybody okay?
So my name is Krishi Pathak and my hobby is singing.
Can you be a bit slower and louder? Sorry, is it, I couldn't catch so fast.
Okay. My name is Krishi Pathak and
Uh-huh.
my hobby is singing.
Your hobby is singing. Very good. And what sports do you like to play if you like sports?
I don't play any sport.
Sorry, did you say something?
I actually don't like sports. I am not sports person. I don't like
Okay,
sports.
no worries. Yeah, you're not a sports person. That's fine. Somebody else in the room can tell me what sport do you like to play? Anybody? Of course, I'm sure all the boys will say cricket, but anybody in the room can say anything.
So I went to. So my name is Ronak Kanwalia, and
Yeah.
my hobbies are reading books and articles pertaining to defense strategies and international relations, and
Mhm.
and the sport I would like to play is football. Though I've been playing football since my childhood, but other than that, I also love to learn new outdoor games like badminton, volleyball, and etc. Thank you.
Perfectly right. So you're very simple, right? Your hobby is to, if I'm correct, if I heard right, you said you read books on defense, right? If I'm correct,
Yes, sir.
defense technology or defense. Perfect. So you write, your hobby is reading books on defense, and the sport which you like to play is football, but you have other passion for sport as well, like badminton and other sports. Okay, thank you, Ronald. Then let's go to the second question, and I want somebody else also to answer the question. So, what movie have you seen the last, and where did you see it? Somebody in the room. Now let's see. Other than Ronak, can, if I'm correct, Krishi Patak. But other than those two, can somebody else say something? Please tell your name also.
Sir, myself Anupam Panchal, and
Anupam. Yeah.
I have
Yes, Anupam.
seen I have seen a picture that's name is Vati, and I have seen this picture in hostel room.
Okay, so you've seen a movie called was it what Vati?
Vati,
Was it?
Vati,
Oh, is it
South
a
Indian film.
Hindi movie? Okay.
No, sir, it's South Indian film dubbed
Oh,
in
it's a South
Hindi.
Indian. Oh, South Indian film dubbed in Hindi. Very good. So you have seen that movie, and also you have seen it in your hostel room. It means, if I may understand, how on your phone,
On laptop.
on laptop. Okay. So on the laptop, you've seen the movie. Either you've seen it on YouTube or some Netflix or Prime Video. Doesn't matter. But you've seen it in your room. Okay. Very good. Then the last question. So thank you, Anupam. Now the last question. What was the last trip you took, and how did you do it? Again, some other student I would like to answer this question. Anybody? Just tell your name, as I said, and speak. Perfectly fine. What was the last trip you took? A trip could be anywhere. And how did you do it? Anybody? Simple question. Students, trip could be anywhere. You could. Yeah. Okay. Somebody speaking. Hello.
Myself, Yudhishthira.
Can you say your
I
first name again? Sorry.
Yudhishthir.
Yudhishthir. Yes. Yes. Hello. Go ahead, Yudhishthir.
Yes, sir. I took my last trip to my village.
Okay. And may I know where is this village? How far from Kota?
No, sir. My village is in Jhunjhunu.
Okay. Which state?
Jhunjhunu, Rajasthan state.
Oh, within Rajasthan. Okay. Very good. Okay. And how did you go to your village?
So by bus.
By bus. Okay. So thank you, Yudhishthir. So you answered the question. You took the last trip within your state in Rajasthan to your village, and you did it with by a bus. Okay. Now, so we had three questions, and we had. So thank you, Yudhishthir, again. So we had three questions. We have three of our friends answering these questions. First question was about the hobby and the sport. Do you like to play? The second question about the movie and where was the movie seen or the picture seen, and the third is the what was the last trip and where or how did the trip happen. So now these three questions, if you just forget the actual question per se, but the question which I would like to now ask is, as is written in the bottom, so any particular observation on these three questions? First is that's my question. And did you find them easy to answer? So first is, any particular observation about these three questions? Can somebody maybe think for a second of not a second, but maybe 10 seconds or something, and say what is it that you observed in these three questions? No right or no wrong answer. Don't worry, students. We are all learning it together.
Sir, here the communication involved like verbal and of listening part.
Yes, communication was involved, but I'm expecting like my expectation or my yeah, my expectation is yes, it is communication, but how did you find it?
Sir, here you as a questionnaire was directly asking the question through verbal mode, and we were communicating with only verbal mode.
Okay, so mode of communication is verbal, that's fine. But more than that, what you said in the earlier part of your statement is direct. So this is very
Yes, sir.
important.
Direct
It was
speaker to listen.
all of the, sorry, is it who just spoke again? Ronak again, if I'm correct?
Sir, it was you were the speaker and we were the listener.
Right, right.
And
No, I'm saying who is just now who is speaking? Are you?
Sir Yudhishthir.
Yudhishthir, sorry, Yudhishthir. Okay, thank you, Yudhishthir. So very good. I was the speaker, you were the listener, or in when you were answering the question, you were the speaker and I was the listener. And it's not just you and me. all of us in this room. Sorry, we are in a virtual mode, but all are listening to what we are speaking together. So it's, yes, it's a verbal communication, but very important part of this exercise is, once again, going back, direct. It means the questions which are asked here are very direct questions, very objective questions, nothing which can be ifs and buts, and there cannot be more than a particularly straightforward answer. So it's a direct question. And I think, needless to say, so did you find them easy to answer? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes,
Anyone?
sir.
Yes. So, so this is one, why we did this exercise is to understand that when we are doing a communication, a direct communication, when the question which is being asked is a very direct question, you have to give a very direct answer. What are your hobbies? Hobbies can be only one or many. What sports do you like to play? It can be one or many, but it's very easy to answer this question because the question which is asked fundamentally is very easy to answer. And this is what is important in a communication, because here you don't need to articulate anything, right? You only need to answer the question which is asked. Once you give the answer, you are done. When I say you, meaning not you, but any of us in the room as answering any of these three questions, we just answer. If somebody asks me the same question, okay, what are your hobby and what sports do you like to play? I will say my hobby is traveling. The sport I like to play is cricket. So it's very simple. Traveling, cricket. Done. I'm done with the answer. It means what I've done is I've given a very direct answer to a question which is also asked very directly. So it's a communication. Now we will go to the next set. Now let's go to articulation and try to understand with these questions what is articulation. So now look at these questions. Why do you have these hobbies? And why do you like that sport and not some other sport? So of course somebody gave the answer. I think it was Ronak, of hobby of reading and fun, and very specifically reading defense related books or articles is one thing. And why did you like that sport, which means let's say football, to make it simple, and not some other? So Ronak, can you give me an answer to this question? Why do you have these hobbies or this hobby, which you already said? And why do you think that sport
Yes.
is that sport and not others? Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So, sir, I have always aspired to become an officer in the Indian Armed Forces. Basically, I belong to a district which is known for the active personnel in the Indian Armed Forces. So, I always wanted to become an officer in the Indian Armed Forces, and that's why I love to read about the armed forces and the books written by the retired officers and about and that's it. And since the game football is a main sport which is being played in my village, or it's nearby 20 to 30 villages, so that's
Mhm.
why I like to play football. And I have played at various levels in football, and in my family as well, my father played football, my brother has played football, and now I am playing football, and that's why.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for this answer. So I think very clear what Ronak just said for both hobby as well as why football. What Ronak just said, of course, this kind of a answer, as everybody can understand, was not about just a simple answer about football and book, or a football and a defense related book or article, right? Which was the previous question. Here, what Ronak just did, long it was a little bit long explanation, but that's fine, is nothing but he articulated the question, because the question which is asked is not what, but why. This is very, very important to understand. When somebody asks you the question, why do you have this hobby? Or why do you like this particular sport and not some other sport? Reason could be anything. For example, in Ronak's case, the sport of football, it is something which he has played from his childhood. It is something which is very popular in his hometown. It is something which is his parents and ancestors and all in the family have been loving that sport. Perfectly fine. If of course these are all definitely personal reasons, and there's no right or wrong anybody, because that's his personal thing. So, but important thing is what Ronak just did was he articulated the reasons behind liking that particular hobby or that particular sport. So this is the difference between previous question, which was more simpler and direct, which is nothing but communicated as an answer, whereas this particular statements which Ronak just made, he articulated because the question was asked in a different way. So what we try to understand with this is nothing but what is the difference between communication versus articulation. Let's go through the remaining two. So about movie, why did you like or not the movie, and why do you like certain kind of movies versus not certain type? So I think who spoke about movie? Was it I forget the name. Who spoke about movie? The one in the
Yes,
hostel room. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Anupam Panchal.
Anupam. Anupam. Yes. So Anupam, can you answer why did you like or not like the movie? What we just saw or have recently seen, the one which was a South Indian, as you said, dubbed in Hindi. And why do you like certain kind of movies versus some other kind of movies? Can you just explain to us or give us that information?
Sir, I was just scrolling and randomly select that particular movie, but after watching that movie, I found some important points or some factual points to be seen. It is about a sir who is teaching all student free of cost, so that can they have a better future or better life.
Okay. So are you saying this is because you like those kind of movies versus not something different, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So thank you, Anupam. So again, Anupam also explained to us a bit more in detail, not just one simple one word or a two word answer, to say that why he liked that particular movie which he has recently seen, and also why certain kind of movies. Once again, whatever might be the reasons, because reasons in this case are his personal reasons and personal liking and personal wish, because that is his thought process, his liking. Very good. Then the third question: why did you make that trip which you have taken, and why do you like or not like to travel there, and why do you like to have certain kind of travel versus not? So I think it was Yudhishthir, if I'm correct, who answered the question about going to the village with the bus.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Yudhishthir, can you to understand the question, why did you make that trip to your village, and why do you like or not like to travel there? So in this case, we can let's say we assume that you like to travel, but why do you like to travel to that place which you recently traveled, and why do you like certain kind of travel versus not? So there are three questions in this one single question. So maybe one by one, if you can answer.
Yes, sir. Actually, I haven't visited my village since a long time,
Hmm,
and that holiday time was also in favor. So
hmm.
I wanted to visit my village. That's why I chose that.
Okay, first part done. Then
And I chose the bus mode of transport because that was more accessible and more comfortable as compared to others.
okay, so of course we are also assuming that you like to travel to that place which you recently traveled, but the reason behind the Yudhishthir's reason to travel to that particular village is because he wanted to go there, but he had not made that trip in a long while. But he likes to go there, so he made that trip. And then the bus, why bus and not any other mode of transport like two-wheeler or train or any other means, is because it, as he explained, it's the most convenient way to get him from where he is today to that place in the village, maybe nearby, where he can conveniently travel by bus and he can accomplish his wish to go to that village. So this is the reasons behind Sudhishthir's travels. So now with these three answers, I hope all of you in the room, students, and I think maybe somebody else can say, now, can somebody say, what do you observe in the above questions? And even though the answers were given by our friends, Anupam, Yudhishthir, and Ronak. So, but in general, if you put yourself in your shoes when you're answering this question, would you find them easy to answer? So first, what do you observe in the above questions? Somebody?
So according to
Anybody?
me, they were not one-liner questions. They
Yeah.
need some explanation,
Yes.
and we were more expressing ourselves while
Yes.
answering them.
Yes. Very good. Yeah. What else?
Only that much. Like
Okay.
in
Okay. Good.
previous
Good.
slide, we were just giving the one-line answer like my hobby is this and that. It was
Right.
not. We were just not expressing our feelings towards the hobby or anything else.
Very good. So you touch base on a very important aspect, expressing your feelings about the hobby or movie or village, going to the village, etc. So that's one thing, very important thing, expression of your hobby or so expression of your emotions or whatever it is. And what else is somebody else? Anybody? What was particularly quite evident from these answers, these three question answers which we just spoke about? Anything particulars which can strike anybody's mind?
And sir, these were directly linked to the person who answered them earlier. Like these were
Yeah,
involved
it,
only
it
3%.
directly linked to the okay. So that honestly we did it by choice, by because we have only 1 hour to cover. Otherwise, if this was in a room, I would have probably asked somebody else to answer. But to be more effective in this session, of course, I chose the three of you who had answered the previous question. But what was, once again, I'm looking for something which is, what was something very particular observed in these questions or during the process of answering these three questions?
Sir, I want to answer. Sir, actually, I want to
Please,
answer
yeah.
the second part of this question. So, actually, while answering that first question, that why I have these hobbies and why I like this sport, is there was a particular kind of concern that was running into my mind, that am I able to tell the audience that that actual thing, that actual reasons that be behind my these hobbies and sports. So
Yeah.
basically, the articulation is perfect or not. That's it.
Okay. So you, uh, what you had in your mind was you were a bit worried, maybe that when you were trying to explain more detail about the why aspect of your hobby or why aspect of your sport, which you like, you were worried that maybe you will not be in a good position to explain clearly or articulate clearly why you like this and so on. So you're a bit worried. It was a bit of an apprehension like this. But that's fine. What you answered was quite very simple, and what the way you articulated it for this question was quite good. Okay, so you had your own worries. That's fine. But I have one thing which is still in my mind, which I want to explain before we move ahead. So maybe one more somebody can say what was particular in these questions, when these questions in these answers, when all three of our friends answered the question. It's very related to what I think just now who spoke, Ronak, right, for the hobby.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, very related to what Ronak said about his worrying factor about whether he would be able to convince, not convince, but whether he would be able to explain. So it's related to that, what I'm thinking. Okay, no worries. So I'll tell you what you observe in these questions is nothing but the person who is answering this question have to think first. As Ronak explained, yes, he was worried because he was worried that his thought process, or when he thought about this question to answer why about that particular hobby and why about that particular sport and not others, would it be clearly explained and understood by the audience? Here I am the audience, you all, everybody in this room other than Ronak for this particular question is the audience. So this is very important, that first you need to think who your audience is and whether our audience will be able to understand what I am speaking or what I am explaining about a particular topic. This is still relatively simple, but when you are going to be in your future careers, you will soon start your career in some company. Slowly you will reach a stage where maybe your superior or your team leader or your boss will say, okay, hey, on this particular topic, we want you to explain to all in a particular room with some presentation or some notes on why you think this is a good plan versus some, or let's say simple, a plan A, plan B for a particular topic in a company. Why plan A is better than plan B or vice versa. So when this kind of a exercise is given to you, any of you, I mean, in a corporate world, you have to first think, because you need to at that time not just communicate that, oh, plan A is better than plan B. Okay, simple answer, but why? That why is going to be very important, because you need to understand who your audience is going to be. If it is your with you and your boss, it can be even simpler because it's only one-on-one. But if it's between you and your boss and your colleagues in the company who are all seated in one room, let's say 20-25 people, and when you are the only one making a presentation about a particular topic, you have to really explain the why of a plan A versus a plan B, which you think is better than the other. And this is why you need to think through the answer, especially when you are articulating something as against when you are communicating something. Of course, I don't mean that when you mean to say that when you're communicating, you don't think. Of course, you think, but you don't have to think so much harder. It's easy to just think quickly. Okay, my hobby is XX, my travel is YY, something like that, because it's very specific question, very direct. But when the question is asked in a why format, you need to really think about, you need to start thinking in your brain, what is it that I'm going to answer, how I'm going to answer this question, is my audience going to be able to understand, and so on, so on. Kind of what Ronak said about the worrying factor. He said it from the worrying aspect, but important thing is to make sure that the receivers are able to understand the crux of the matter, which is nothing but the articulation. Are we okay? Are we on a good track, or anybody has any point, any question? Still something is not clear, because if we do not understand this, today exercise is basically fundamentally about these two things. Of course, there are a few more slides which I will cover in the remaining 15-20 minutes. But main thing I wanted to explain today is the fundamental difference between communication and articulation. And I really want all of you to understand what exactly articulation means, because this will, when you grow, as I said again, when you go in your future career in industry, this becomes very, very, very important. And believe me, even today, uh, I'm working in the industry for quite some time, but when I am given a topic to speak about, when I have to convince my so-called stakeholders, which is internal in the company or some external stakeholder, I need to also think, because I don't know. I'm also very fearful, apprehensive, afraid that whether I will be able to communicate clearly. I'm using the word communicate, but whether I'll be able to articulate clearly why I think something is more important than the other, and whether I'll be able to convince the receiving party of that. This is extremely important. So anybody, any comment? I'll take a pause for 2 minutes, then we'll go ahead. Any question? Anything still unclear? Or if you think it's too fast, tell me anything. It's okay. I can slow down. Anything? Anybody? Any comment? No, all good.
Yes, sir.
Yes, maybe one yes. Remaining audience, I just hope everybody's awake.
Yes,
Okay. Thank you. So I think I'll go ahead the next few slides, and then we will because I have at least 15 minutes remaining. So let's go ahead. So this is a very simple represent. You can see my screen, right, guys? The green, red, and yellow dot circle.
yes, yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. Okay. So then just to explain the why and the how and the what paradigm and its relation to articulation. So if you see the outermost circle here, which is green, is what? What is very, very simple, because what is nothing but the result. So what is your hobby? Direct question. It's a result. You will get a straightforward answer. Then the next is the why, which is the red circle. It is nothing but the process. Sorry, the red is the how. Excuse me. Red is the how. It is nothing but the process. And the crux of it, the middle circle, is the why. So it means, as we explained, as we have seen in the previous three questions, the core of articulation is the why. So why do you want to do something? What is the purpose? Why do you want to do it? What is the reason behind this? So it's all why. So here it's written here as beliefs, but here it's nothing, not only about beliefs, it's about the beliefs, it's about your own perspective on any subject or any topic or any discussion. So this is very, very important to understand, and this is why we call it the golden circle. So very, very important is the why portion in the communication, because it's more at the core, which is why it is a bit more complex and a bit more detailed, and you have to think through it when you articulate something to about a topic to somebody. So just remember this, it's just a very schematic representation on simple thing is what, then middle process thing is how, and the core of it is nothing but the why of articulation. So very quickly, we'll go through one quick topic. You have some product idea and you want to make, I will not get time in this session, but I will send you this material. You can do some exercise within your group on your own. So I'll say you have a product idea and you want to make a presentation to a potential investor, somebody who wants to invest in your company for a particular product you want to start developing and eventually manufacture it and sell it and get profit out of it. So you want to make a presentation to a potential investor for getting their feedback, and ideally also to get some investment as an angel investor. Investment meaning some investment firm to agree to funding your project which you have. So sorry for that. Here, very simple. I'm coming from an automotive industry, so I say you have a product idea, a new type of car. Okay, I want to start designing and developing a new type of car. So we'll not go into the detail, but let's do a simple exercise. Anybody in the room say, if I ask you, what new type of car would you like to develop for a market like India? Any any wild guesses, any wild ideas, thoughts? Somebody in the room? Anybody? Are you with me? Hello, all of you?
Yes,
Yeah.
personally, I would like to have a car that will not require much parking space.
Okay.
Yeah,
It means you want a car which is not requiring much car parking space. It means you want a more size-wise, smaller type of a car, right? Is that
yes,
correct?
sir.
More of a compact car, something like that is in your mind?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll not go into detail, but just to give a quick my thought process and just to create some discussion. Fully, that's your wish, perfectly right. But when you want to develop this kind of a car, what would you first do? You will now, let's say that you are a consumer and you're not somebody who wants to just develop a car. If you are a consumer and you want to buy this kind of a small car which will fit into the parking space, it means you will go to the market and look for something which is a small car, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So today in India, though, if some of you or all of you are familiar, of course, with basic car manufacturers like Maruti, Hyundai, Toyota, Tata, Mahindra, then Renault, Nissan, so on, so on. So any idea who amongst these have this kind of a small car available today in the market? Anybody?
Tata and
Tata, okay. And which car in Tata? Do you know offhand?
Nano.
Nano, okay, but Nano recently stopped production because of not
Yes,
a
right.
good product in the market. So it stopped. So Nano is now today not available in the market for buying. Any other car?
All the small cars have, they have stopped making those cars like Maruti 800. It was small, but it's
Yeah.
also they stopped making.
Okay. So without going into much detail from time constraint point of view, Maruti 800, yes, but Maruti 800 is stopped. However, Maruti is still selling another car which is called Alto. It is not as small as 800, but it's still a quite small car. What I'm trying to say in this case is, sorry, who was speaking just now? Again, I didn't catch your name.
Krishi Pathak, sir.
Rishi Pathak. Okay. So see, what is happening here is you want to develop this car, but if a car is like that is already existing in the market, would you still want to do a new type of car? It means you want to compete with that car, right? It's fine. That's a good idea. But then you have to be very careful, because when you want to develop a car which is selling, which will be a direct competition to an existing car which is selling well in the market, like Maruti Suzuki Alto or WagonR and so on, you need to really do a very deep thought process and again articulate how your product which you are developing for your company will compete with this kind of a car or a product which is existing in today market, and so on, so on. So we'll not go into detail today, but please think from, excuse me, please think from that perspective. It's going to be a very, I would not say the word difficult, nothing is difficult, but it's going to be a very detailed and very complicated task of doing that. Anybody else in
Yes.
the room? No worries, that's your plan. So perfectly you can go ahead. Anybody else in the room? Any new type of car? Now let's say a new type of car which is not existing today in the India market. Anybody, any thought?
So hydrogen fuel cars.
Well, okay, hydrogen fuel car. So now somebody just saying that instead of fuel, which is typical petrol and diesel car, a hydrogen fuel car. Okay, so that is a new type of a car. Fine. However, here also is going to be a very detailed task and detailed kind of a project in itself to prepare a set of fact and data and document on how will you convince your company to develop this hydrogen fuel car to sell in that market. Okay, we'll not go into detail, but that's a type of a car. And the last but not the least, somebody, do you know what is the latest technology, what is in the car market other than the fuel and the hydrogen fuel?
Electric cars.
Sorry,
Electric cars.
electric cars. Very good. So EVs, electric vehicles. So today, as you know, electric vehicles are slowly gaining popularity in the India market, even electric two-wheelers also. So now today, if you are going to develop a new type of a electric car, at least you want to develop something which is not existing today in the market, something very new, something which will appeal to the consumer. But then there are so many thought process behind that. You have to think what price point you need to design the car for and so on. There is another session on product development, so I will not go into that space in this session, but I just wanted to tell you that when you have this thing in your mind, make sure that you are able to well articulate your thoughts and your thinking on why aspect of a EV or a hydrogen car or so on. So this is just an example to give. But there is of course another session which you will probably you have done, or maybe you will do, which is about product management, whether it is in the automotive sector or the software sector or any, it doesn't matter. Product development is a methodology or a process by itself, and we will cover that. Satkam will cover it in some other session. Okay, now, so just wanted to give you again, going back to our basic articulation versus communication concept, some basic techniques for effective communication. more or less we covered that in our session today. But if you see the top all the boxes, one is on the voice. It means when you're speaking, how you're toning your voice, slow, fast, length. Some words you have to emphasize more in some specific sentences and so on so on. Then research, of course, body language, we spoke about that. Then I statements. We should never use the word I. Always we should use the word we or us or our. It's just a way of communicating. Then active listening, facial expressions, we talked about that. Start, mid and end. When you're making a presentation for a good effective communication or articulation, you need to see what is your starting point, what is your end point, what is your mid point, and how you're able to engage the audience from start to finish. This is very important. Then you can go through the remaining, but okay to say no, pick the medium, vocabulary, take some pause in between, because you need to understand if the receiver is able to understand what you are speaking. And then sequence it and time it, because you need to keep the time. So today, even in my presentation today, I'm not perfect, but I'm trying to more or less pace it in a way that we still keep the time, but I hope I'm not too fast, because if somebody is too fast in the communication or explanation, things will get lost. The importance of what somebody is saying will not be communicated effectively, and then it will be somewhere lost in the process. Okay, last slide. So how do you really plan for a good articulation on a particular topic? And don't misunderstand, when I say articulation, it's not only articulation, because when you articulate something after a particular topic is prepared, you need to explain it to somebody. It means you need to communicate also. So although we said communication is of course direct communication, articulation is something which you think. End of the day, you will still should be able to communicate what you have articulated in your mind. So some important tips though for articulation and good articulation. The most important, as it's seen in the first bullet point, knowing the goal, knowing the topic, and absolutely most important is knowing the audience. Because you need to know whom your audience is when you're speaking, because then and then only you can articulate your thoughts and your presentation or your speech, so that the communication is very effective to the audience. So this is most important when you're articulating or even communicating. Then very important is knowing the start, middle, and end, knowing how to manage the time and manage the agenda, knowing how to engage the audience and know if it's happening, and the sequence of the presentation. And last but not the least, it's still important is, as we said before, the tone, the pace, the format of the presentation, and cultural aspects, if any, the I and the V part, and what to say and what not to say. This is very important also when you communicate, because there are some examples which you want to avoid for whatever cultural reasons or language reasons, whatever it is. But you need to be able to use more generic or more general expressions when you're speaking. So these are just some tips on how do you plan for a good articulation on a particular topic, and then plan for the delivery of that topic. When I say delivery, meaning communicate that topic. So this is my session today. I know 1 hour is not enough, but this is what I wanted to cover today. I still have maybe few minutes. If somebody has any question or some comment, something which you would like to just share, perfectly fine. Anybody? Anybody? Anything? I know 1 hour sometimes flies very fast and not enough, but anybody wants to make any question? Please feel free. We are here all learning together. No? Was it okay? At least you got some understanding of basics of
Yes, sir.
communication,
Yes,
basics of
sir.
articulation. Okay. So feel free. We will feel free to also give us the feedback on this session. because we would also like to know all our team member in Satcom how this is happening, whether you all want to have it in a different format or something. We are open. So thank you for the coordination. I don't think it's time for I think it's time for the next session.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir,
Oh,
for the
hello.
great segment.
Thank you very much. So Kartik Srinivasan is already waiting, so I won't take your time. Kartik.
Thank you, Abhay.
Hello. Okay, thank you all. Thank you very much. I will
Yes,
sign off.
sir.
So thank you very much. Have a good evening. Thank you. Kartik, you can take
Thank you,
over.
sir.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much.
Good evening, sir. Now we have with us Kartik Srinivasan, sir, and he is the Chief Product Architect for one of the product family at IBM, and he has more than 20 plus years of industry experience. So, oh my God, he will share with us his insights and the knowledge that he has. And thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. Today, he will talk about understanding cloud computing. Viewers have already know, but we would like to know more about computing by sir. So, hand over to you, sir.
Thank Thank you so much. Uh, Hello, friends, and a very, very good afternoon to everyone. Hope everybody has had a good lunch. Nobody's sleepy, because this topic, I think, is going to be very close to everybody's hearts. We do this, and are exposed to this on a very regular basis. It's just that probably we don't look at it in the way that the evolution of cloud computing has happened. So today's session essentially focuses on cloud computing concepts, architectural differences in many ways, how the evolution for cloud computing has progressed, and tries to give you an understanding and appreciation of many of these concepts in a manner that is easy to understand. So without further ado, I will get started. We will cover a couple of, or maybe two or three things today, which is the evolution part of cloud computing, evolution of computing, just a definition of what cloud computing really means and what are the different kinds of cloud computing models that are available to us. So that is broadly the agenda for today. And I would love if this is a interactive conversation. We converse and have question and answers anytime during the session. So feel free to stop me if you have any questions any time of the presentation. Just a quick check. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. All right, great. So let's kick this off. I want all of you to take a look at these three pictures. Do you want to guess what these three pictures are? Anyone?
The second one is a steam engine, and
Wonderful.
third one is Thomas Alva Edison with his bulb. And first one, I'm not sure, is it a printing press?
Wonderful. You've got a hat trick of correct answers and exactly what these three pictures are. So any reason why you think like these three pictures are put here together?
They show three great inventions.
Go on, go on. I think you're on the right track. Sorry, I lost you a little bit. Can you repeat that
Only
again?
that much. I mean, these three inventions were very. Yeah, I was saying these three picture depicts the many important and popular inventions that happened.
Wonderful. And I think the other key thing is they change the way we live, right? Big time. Each of these inventions brought
Yes.
about a huge revolution in the way we look at things, we do things, especially from a human civilization perspective. Each one of them had a very, very serious impact, right? And what I wanted to underline with this set of pictures is that cloud technologies are doing pretty much the same thing. They are revolutionizing, changing how we work, engage with each other, study, and essentially, like, every bit of the human fabric, right, is now relying on cloud technologies to a great extent. This is very much a key integral part of how we live our lives. So I just wanted all of us to have this sense, because it is in a way very revolutionary in the things that it is bringing along. And we've all seen what has happened in the last 2 3 years, with COVID, with education, and pretty much not having classrooms at all, how people were able to manage with just the digital uh, conferences, etc. The same medium that we are using today, it is nothing short of revolutionary. Now, how we have come here is essentially a huge evolution, right? And when we think about evolution in computing, you may not be aware, but, like, I don't know how many of you have seen a mainframe or heard about a mainframe, but predominantly the mainframes were the only computing technology that was available in the late 60s to 80s, right? This is predominantly large, huge machines with centralized processing powers. There were terminals that used to connect to these machines in order to submit work, process work, get outputs, and then display it on the dumb consoles. So this is how predominantly computing used to happen in the early days. And in fact, uh, the organization that I work for, which is IBM, is one of the few revolutionary pioneers of this kind of a computing mechanism or computing technology, right? The things are there are still organizations and companies and domains where this kind of a computing is very much in use. And the key thing being that when you bring all of these things together in a central processing large machine, it becomes extremely expensive, right? So when we started with this, people realized that there has to be better ways of doing things, and that led to a new kind of evolutionary change, which is the client server architecture. And this is somewhere between late 1980s and 2000s. What we started seeing is that the terminals that used to connect to this central server were no longer dumb. They had some intelligence embedded in them, in the way that they could do some local processing and then submit work onto the servers, which were still centralized, right? This also led to many protocols being established, because clients used to submit work to the server. All of this is going to happen remotely, right? And the idea here was to come up with protocols that could enable remote connections and work to be distributed, etc. So this was an evolutionary change in the 2000s. The next series of changes that happened is on-premise server clusters. What enterprises, businesses realized is that with one server you couldn't do much. You had to have more powerful servers, perhaps even clusters of those servers, right? And be able to do the things that the business wanted to do. Now, many of these things, you see this series of racks that are displayed on this picture. This is predominantly how any data center looks today. However, this was just a data center for a specific organization or an enterprise. Now, this enterprise would purchase these machines, host them, then run their applications on it. This could be web applications, this could be some server-driven applications as well, and you had remote clients connecting to them through laptops, right? So as we went through the journey, maybe 2000s, mid 2000s, what happened is a technology called virtualization came into picture. And essentially you could have virtual servers on sitting on this kind of an infrastructure that would almost simulate as if you have your own machine, right? On this large cluster, there would be virtual servers created, and then you could have different teams, people, individuals, applications, etc. And that made the whole process of application development much more easier and simpler. So even with on-premise server clusters and virtualization, people started to see the potential of what could be done by bringing infrastructure together and being able to utilize technologies like virtualization to achieve large-scale processing results. Now, went through this course in the journey, what they realized is, in some cases, even this is not sufficient, right? And there are new needs and completely new requirements that have now come in for somebody to be able to run a business. These businesses, the number of businesses, for example, nowadays, right? There are small businesses, there are medium businesses, large businesses, and every day there are new businesses that are coming into existence. Imagine every one of them having to set up a cluster like this on-prem server cluster on their own and run it and manage it. Would they be able to spend time on doing something that they were doing for their business ideas? Maybe not. The stuff is so complicated that setting this up and running this becomes an extremely expensive affair again. So that led to this thing called the cloud. And essentially many different engineering organizations like Amazon or Google and Azure starting to provide services which essentially enabled somebody to not necessarily have to host a whole bunch of these clusters of servers on their enterprise premises, right? It is essentially something that is very scalable. It provides global presence. You can do this anywhere. You can pick a data center in the US, in India, many cities in India, and be able to run your business at any given point in time. The other advantage of this is that the costs are very low to start off. Now, over a period of time, maybe owning this infrastructure is cheaper, but to start off, right, and especially when it comes to new businesses, etc., this low upfront cost is an extremely important aspect for businesses to consider. And that is one of the reasons why this becomes a very successful model of computing. Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about cloud computing. Now, we've talked a little bit about cloud, but what is cloud computing in reality, right? And what are we really talking about over here? We talked about Amazon, AWS, we talked about GCP, we talked about Azure, but what are these things really? So essentially, the way to think about this is that you can imagine that there is a presence, a point of presence somewhere in a particular location, and we'll come to why this is a cloud. This is basically a fuzzy little place where you don't know where it exists, which part of the city it is in, etc. It's just something that appears out of nowhere virtually, just like a cloud, right? And essentially we can all philosophize on why a cloud is a cloud, but you can imagine this to be a vast amount of computing resources, whether it is CPU, RAM, disk space, network, right? And in modern times also software services that are available through the internet and across many different data centers of the world. So that is the notion of a cloud. I'll pause here for a second. Any questions around this?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Right. Now, in terms of computing, right, the whole series of technologies and processes that allows you to manage all of these things in order to build a product, a capability on the cloud is essentially what is cloud computing, right? So you're using all of these things somewhere. You're probably making use of a server on the cloud, allocating some memory for it, some disk space for it, understanding what your network needs are going to be, whether it is a 1 Gbps line, 10 Gbps line, what kind of databases are you going to make use of. All of these things are available for you to pick and choose. Now, once you have picked and chosen all of this, using all of this and assembling it in a way that the technology and processes that you are assembling gives rise to something that is of business use, right? Applications, any kind of content delivery, etc., is all examples of cloud computing, right? Like we said, from an advantages perspective, what this does is offers you unlimited scalability. Now, very often in the picture that we saw earlier in the on-premise model, what would happen is let's say an organization set up a on-premise server cluster, right? It needed some space. You need a lot of space to run your own servers. Now, what happens if the organization grows and you've got to add more servers? It is a very tough problem, because when you start to think about what you need to put those servers together, those clusters and racks of servers together, it is electricity, it is space in the office wherever the data center sits, it is air conditioning, it is security. There are so many different things that need to be set up, that makes it extremely expensive, right? And what these clouds give us is essentially a very easy way to scale out. They are extremely cost effective because many of these things are shared. The premise where the data center is hosted is shared. Electricity supply is almost each of these cloud vendors actually generate their own electricity to run their data centers. So they are very independent. They are very well managed. It is essentially economies of scale, because they are pooling in all the resources and making them available for somebody to use. Somebody can use it and sort of give it back, and then it can be used for somebody else. These are all very good properties of or characteristics of cloud computing that helps in making it extremely cost effective and provides very high scalability and availability, right? So essentially, what is the biggest advantages for business is that you can forget the complexities of running this entire environment yourself, and you focus on doing what you do best. You can build your own e-commerce applications. You can build the latest and greatest chat or social media applications, video streaming applications, anything that you may want to build as a business, and you forget the rest of the problems about how infrastructure, CPU, RAM, disk has to be managed to some of these cloud services. That makes it extremely easy for you to start off, right? In a lot of ways, right, this is a very, very common architectural picture that you will see all over, right? It doesn't matter any application that you may pick, that you make use of, whether it is an Amazon e-commerce site, or a Flipkart website, or an IRCTC website. Pretty much every one of these technologies follows a very simple architectural model, where there are users or clients to the left who are talking to these web applications through the internet. You usually see a front end interface where the user interacts with the system, and then the front end actually delegates a whole lot of business functionality to what is called as the business logic layer, or the backend. The backend then sort of does multiple things. It interacts with hardware resources like storage, computing capabilities like CPU, RAM, etc., and also perhaps talks to other external systems. For example, in an e-commerce site, this could be a credit card payment gateway, right? And you're essentially filling in your credit card details, and then it goes to the Visa servers, for example, or Mastercard servers, or American Express servers, to go and validate your authentication credentials, make sure that the transaction can progress. And there are so many such external integrations that happen today in the context of any business application, right? So that is the bottom part that we are trying to highlight here. So I'm just giving you a rubric of a very simple web application that is typically deployed today. You can call it anything that you like, a Flipkart or a Clear Trip, Make My Trip, or Amazon, whatever you want to call it. But typical architecture looks like this. Now, when you do cloud deployments, excuse me. So when you do cloud deployments, things change, because this previous picture that we were looking at, maybe for a few handful of users, this works perfectly fine, right? But now let's imagine if you add many more users and clients and people who are accessing the server. I mean, you can imagine, for example, coming in at 8 a.m. at the IRCTC website to book a train ticket, for example, right? When a Tatkal queue starts, there is probably a rush of hundreds of thousands of people who are trying to book that ticket, right? And especially during vacation times and all of that, when the peak tourism season is on, it's essentially a lot of users who are trying to get on the website and be able to book the ticket of their choice. Now, many of these users end up hitting like one or more of the redundant presentation layer services that is deployed on the cloud. These front-end services then talk to back-end business logic layer. Again, this is probably deployed on multiple different servers as applications, right? And with the backend itself, then reaching out to whoever it needs to reach out to finish that transaction, credit card servers, for example, or save the ticket information in the database of the IRCTC website, right? All of this, when you look at these multiple blocks here, this system is designed for redundancy, which means that every bit of the architecture that you see here, whether it is the front end, whether it is the back end, whether it is the storage, you have multiple copies of these applications running at any given point in time, so that if one fails, if there is a hardware problem, disk fails, you always have another that is available to you to complete the operation that is needed to be done. And there is sufficient amount of this redundancy built into the system so that the system scales. It offers a certain level of quality of service, correct? So this is typically the deployment when you put it in a cloud. You're designing for redundancy because things can fail, right? The other thing, the things that happen is when a lot of this traffic starts coming in, you have to route between these n number of resources that you see over here, the pinks and the yellows and the blues and the reds. You essentially need to be able to route this to one of these services. So usually people end up creating things called load balancers in between. That is essentially taking a request that is coming in from a user or a client and equitably distributing it across the entire topology or the entire architecture, right? So for example, this top load balancer over here, it is responsible to take a request from one of the users and put it or delegate it or route it to one of the front end services, right? Any one of them. And depending on the load, depending on round robin, depending on a certain frequency or certain ratio of requests, etc., you can route this to a certain server. And that server, in turn, when it reaches out to the backend layer, will go through yet another load balancer, which is doing exactly the same thing for this part of the architecture. Similarly, the piece that interacts with the storage is doing exactly the same thing on the load balancing side for the storage. And the same thing happens for external integrations as well. So this is a very commonly repeating pattern. When you have redundancy, you need routing. And people make use of these things called load balancers to balance the load across multiple redundant copies of a service that is running, right? These are concepts that I'm making you aware, because as you get and understand a lot of cloud computing, these are very basic concepts that I'm trying to give you a very high level sense of. Obviously there is a whole lot that happens behind the scenes, but you need to have a bit of conceptual understanding so that the next time you interact with one of these systems, you understand what may be going on behind the scenes and you're able to appreciate the complexity behind it. right? And what all happens in a very easy and simple manner for us to see. But behind the scenes, there is so much going on to make this happen, right? So hopefully by the end of this session, you will have an appreciation for that. The other interesting thing that we need to think about is monitoring and auto scaling. Now imagine that this scenario where we talked about, where the IRCTC website at 8 a.m. Tomorrow morning is going to see a flurry of activity because the Tatkal tickets have to be booked, or the booking is opening for the 2 months later date when vacations are all starting, or the tourism season is starting. It's a mad rush, right? So many a times you don't know that there is going to be rush, right? And like, it could be, for example, an e-commerce site that I mean, somebody noticed that, let's say, an HMT watch, this is the last ever day an HMT watch is going to be sold on Flipkart, let's say, right? And there is only a limited amount of them that are going to be sold. Flipkart may or may not have anticipated that this is going to cause a huge demand, but when that happens, they need to be ready to be able to handle it. So which means that you need some mechanisms that can detect that a huge flurry of load is coming in, and be able to spin up a third, a fourth, a fifth replica of the front end layer, right? So in the same way, perhaps add more capacity to the back end layer. And all of this is happening because the system is being monitored real time, on the fly. Any incoming request is essentially being tracked as a time series. It is being looked at very, very closely to see if the capacity is going beyond, let's say, 80%, then automatically spin up a new replica of the front end layer, or maybe two replicas of the front end layer, so that they can handle the additional load. So this notion, concept, is essentially called as auto scaling. And there are ways to do this across services, there are ways to do this across storage, CPU, RAM, etc. All of this can be done on the fly in the modern cloud services like Amazon or GCP or Azure. And this is a very important and critical concept, because with auto scaling, you can actually save costs. You only run infrastructure when there is actually a demand for it. Otherwise, you keep it at 2 or 3 servers, because every time you spin up a server, there is a cost. And you want to only pay that cost when you're really seeing some demand, and that demand can offset for the price for this scaling in some sense. Correct? Now, the third series of concepts that I think cloud provides is this notion of availability, fault tolerance, and global presence. We saw this picture, right? What happens if this entire site, let's say, we deployed this entire web application in the let's say the Chennai region on AWS, and then Chennai suddenly had a huge, massive statewide power outage, and the entire data center is down. Does that mean that my business should stop? Maybe not, right? It shouldn't stop, because there are so many customers that I am servicing who are not maybe in Chennai, and I still need the business to be up and running. So with cloud deployments and this notion of availability, what happens is essentially you can distribute your services across regions. So you could pick a region in India, you could pick a region in the US, and be able to distribute or load balance the users from one region to go to one site, the users from another region to go to another site, right? It also gives you a whole big defense against fault tolerance. So any faults that happen in the system, you can actually shut off a region and be able to only service it through one, while you go about servicing what has gone wrong, any kind of hardware problems, infrastructure problems, etc. Any kind of outages on the cloud services also can be managed through this. So the idea here is that with with what is called as regions in clouds, you can manage availability and faults in a much better way, and you can even do this across the globe. All right. So this is a very important concept to understand and appreciate. Right. So in summary, I think like basically there are a few essential characteristics. One is the ability for us to unilaterally provision resources without requiring any human interaction with the service provider. You remember the example that I called out for auto scaling? There is really nobody who's sitting and watching what is happening, how many people have logged in, etc. This is entirely done by the system, right? We have given the power of being able to scale this up or scale this down, provision new servers, add new hardware, etc., to the entire system in an automated manner. It doesn't need a single iota of human interaction at all to do these activities. So it is that level of automation, right, is being provided on an on-demand basis. So that is one of the essential characteristics of cloud computing. Broad network access, and essentially we need to be able to provide all of these services over the internet and across many different kinds of clients. It could be desktops, it could be laptops, it could be a browser, it could be mobile phones, an app. There are so many different ways in which this can be accessed. It's mind-boggling, right? So the idea is to be able to give the access across any possible manner, so that the business can do whatever they want to do without being in a situation where they can't handle a certain kind of customers or certain kind of users who want to interact with their system. Resource pooling is another characteristic. Now, obviously, like when we say this is unlimited, scalable, etc., there is still a limit. It's just that the limit is so big that these companies are investing so much on hardware and software and infrastructure capacity and keeping that up and ready so that anytime somebody needs it, it is available. Now, it can only happen if these resources are being pooled. If you don't have pooling, then you have to dedicate capacity, and dedicated capacity is always very expensive. We saw that in that example where we said on-premise businesses hosting a rack, etc., is very expensive. Dedicated capacity is exactly that. If you want to have dedicated capacity, or you don't want any kind of resource pooling, costs become extremely prohibitive. So an essential characteristic for a good cloud computing service is to be able to do as much resource pooling as possible so that these resources can be shared across different set of users, applications, even organizations in some sense. Because as you auto scale, you can not only auto scale up, but you can also scale down and give back the resources that you took when you scaled up. Correct? So these are essential characteristics. Obviously, the elasticity part, which is what we talked about, scaling up and down. These are essential characteristics of a cloud service, a good cloud service. Right? Now, this is sort of like a quiz question, right? There is now I have just spoken about the almost unlimited options in terms of computing resources now being available, and it leads to innovation opportunities. Now, can you think of some things that perhaps 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, you may not even have imagined are now possible? And we will try and see what could cloud computing have to do with it. So maybe anybody to take a guess. So things that you may not even have imagined 15 years ago that were possible are very much in use today, household use today. Anyone?
Like cashless transactions.
Wonderful. Very good. So why do you think it was not a possibility maybe 10 years ago? Right.
People
So
were
so
not
for example,
aware of
credit
the
card.
QR system and all.
Very nice, very nice. I think like many people were using. So when we say cashless, right, we have to be very clear about what cashless. Many people were using credit cards, but the penetration of credit cards, for example, was not to every household. There were only a select few on this planet that could use credit cards. They were usually well off people, higher income groups that could even afford a credit card, right? There is so much more cashless happening today that doesn't use the traditional cashless concepts of credit cards these days. When you look at any of the UPI transactions, etc., they are wonderful examples of what has been possible by cloud computing, because the scale at which some of these things happen far outrun anything that credit cards can do, right? The possibilities of everybody having a mobile phone who's able to do a cashless transaction now, I think like maybe even 10 years back we would not even have had inkling that this was coming, right? But the fact that there is ease of a few companies to reimagine what cashless transaction is, I think is a great example of what opportunities cloud computing has been able to provide. It's massive innovation shrunk in a very short time frame, that everything has changed in the last maybe 10 years, right? So it is a great example. Thanks for bringing that up. What else? Anybody else? Anything else?
So e-commerce websites, uh, like
Okay,
not the ones that we normally use, something like uh, related to more
wonderful.
household, that are more inclined towards basic household use, not just that are familiar to us.
Very nice. What else? Nobody watches Netflix?
Yes.
So great examples. I mean, this is something that was never going to be possible in like maybe last 15 years back. And you see now that there are free apps that are providing you live stream of IPL. I mean, could you imagine whenever IPL used to happen, we used to buy a Tata Sky or whatever subscription pack from Star Sports HD. Very expensive. Now it is far cheaper and almost free, because all that revenue that comes that is essentially uh, money that is used to like feed that content to us is probably coming more from advertising, right? So it has revolutionized a whole series of businesses, right? Financial businesses, commercial businesses, e-commerce, for example, entertainment and media, sport, mind-boggling. You can imagine, and like there will be tens and hundreds of such businesses that you may think about. IoT is another great use case, right? How many of us have Alexa at home? Do you think we would have been able to use or think about that kind of an interface for our music applications, or even controlling like every single device in our house, whether it be an electric fan, a washing machine? So much has happened in the last 15 years. Health tracking, maps, right? WhatsApp is a great example. And then, like, how many of us have used Google Photos, for example, sharing videos, etc. YouTube. Tons and tons of these technologies have come up in the last 15 to 20 years. Now, I want you to think about cloud computing in a slightly different way. Now, I want you to imagine that you have a plan for having your dinner, right? And a very simple dinner, right? There is probably like this is a typical Indian meal, right? Now, I want you to imagine what it takes to get to this meal, right? Uh, what do you think it takes to get to this meal, right? If this kitchen is in your house, you probably, and that is the notion of an on-premise kitchen, which means inside your premises, your house, there is probably a kitchen that you're going to make use of, and you need a bunch of raw materials. You need dal, you need rice, you need flour, you need vegetables, some spices, oil, water, a gas stove. You need to know how to cook this, and so you are the chef, and you need table and cutlery, correct? So these are all the raw ingredients that it takes to make this nice meal. Right now, contrast this against what is a cloud provided meal? So how many of you have heard about cloud kitchens? Everyone, right? Secretly, I mean, nobody will admit it, but everybody secretly orders every day. Right? That's
Yes,
what their ad seems to say, right? So now you imagine what the steps are to get to this meal. You select the food to eat. You're just picking pictures on the app. You pay. You wait for the delivery, and then gratification. Correct. So you can imagine the set of steps that you're taking to get to this meal on the left side versus what is happening on the right side, right? Very similar to businesses, right? If I wanted something as an outcome and I've had to like go through these series of steps, it probably took me an hour and a half, 2 3 hours to do this, and I could have been doing something else that is more important to me. uh, and I'm not saying food is not important, but at the moment there will be certain things that I probably wanted to get done as a business, right? So imagine the amount of time a cloud provided meal frees up. The same analogy to a business, if they didn't have to set up a data center, set up a whole series of things that is needed for them to run a successful business, and they could just take this off the shelf, pick like you picked the kind of ingredients or the recipes that you wanted to get delivered to your house. If you were able to pick from a catalog a certain kind of machine, configuration of machines, a certain set of applications, a database, etc., and just be able to put together a solution that does wonders to your business, would you want to wait, or you want instant gratification? You probably want instant gratification because you want to try this out before the next guy who's competing with you gets this done. So that is the sort of analogy that I would like you to take back and think about cloud in general. Now with that, we'll do little bit of a deep dive into different kinds of cloud computing models, right? So you have a budget and you have certain amount that you are willing to pay for uh, a service. Then you basically need to look at different deployment models and pick one of them that best suits your purpose. There is essentially a private cloud, and we spoke about private cloud in the notion of an enterprise where they were setting up their own racks, etc., a mini data center, so to speak. Public clouds, which is essentially the Amazon Web Services, AWS, GCP, Azures of the world. And then there is the notion of a hybrid cloud, which is a combination of both private and public cloud, right? So you can actually contrast between the three, right? And essentially private cloud means complete ownership, and you own everything, you run everything, you are responsible for the security. You've got like skills and administration people who are managing this infrastructure on a day-to-day basis, etc. It's expensive to run, but there are certain organizations that can afford it. There are certain organizations that need to do this because of regulatory reason, etc., etc. So, for example, the RBI, or let's say the Defense Services of India, they may not be very open to using public clouds where resources are being shared, etc., for a variety of different reasons. Regulatory, the fear of an enemy being able to access some data that is extremely valuable and sensitive. There are many different reasons why somebody would opt for a public private cloud. But if you contrast that with public clouds, right, it is essentially something that is run by a third party person. You may trust them, obviously, and they do a lot of things to gain your trust, because many of these cloud services are also compliant with a whole bunch of government regulations, etc. These usually work off shared resources, right? And that is the way they reduce costs. There is no upfront cost. You don't have to pay upfront a certain amount to buy, to set something up, etc. It is like a rental, right? You're essentially getting into a rental deal, and you're just renting services rather than buying them. The left side here is completely buying it out, right? And you are responsible for it. You need to run it. if the lifetime of that storage disk is 5 years, you've got to figure out how within the next 5 years you're going to replace it as well. Whereas in the public cloud environment, all of this is the headache of the third party. No upfront costs. It is very agile. It is elastic, right? You can access it over the internet. You've got a very flexible cost-based consumption model that these public clouds provide. And essentially, as technologies advance and services become newer and newer services start coming in, you have the advantage of being able to pick them off the shelf, just like you would pick a food item or a recipe from the menu of a Swiggy or a Zomato. You take the advantage of newer things that are coming in and move to those newer things as and when you need them, while at the same time keeping your costs very low. The hybrid cloud is an interesting variation, and many companies are in this journey today, right? Where it is flexible because many companies start from a private cloud and want to go to the public cloud, right? But they have certain challenges where they think that, oh, not all their data can go to the public cloud. They need to keep certain pieces of data private in their private clouds. And it's a extremely challenging environment because now you need skills to be able to run a private cloud, maybe a limited version of the private cloud, because many things are moving to the public cloud. But you still need skills to maintain that. You also need skills to maintain the public cloud as well. So in general, for companies that have hybrid cloud deployments, you need a lot of deep technical skills, both on the private cloud side as well as on the public cloud side, right? So it is relevant, very relevant, and many companies are opting for this, but it is an evolutionary phase. And as more and more companies start getting comfortable with public clouds, the future probably is more or less on public clouds with a little bit of maybe hybrid presence, where extremely sensitive and critical data probably will reside in a small private cloud within the enterprise, but the rest of it is all on public clouds, right? The next thing I wanted to talk about here is categories of cloud services. Now, when we choose a public cloud, there are many different categories of services that are available based on what the user wants. So, for example, you could have users who are essentially business users or consumers of a service, right? So, a very good example for this is Gmail, right? We just sign up, we get access to a bunch of services from Gmail for our mail, calendar, etc. Correct? Then there is developers, right? And people who are building Gmail, people who are building Dropbox and WhatsApps, etc. They need a development platform to build their apps, correct? So they probably need a database where they want to store their data of users, etc. They probably need some messaging infrastructure, etc. They probably need load balancers. They need many different things to put together an application for their business, right? And then finally there is a set of people who are managing this whole thing, right? Who understand how to set up networks, who understand how to set up machines and VMs and etc. So the administrators are also a very big community, right? Now now the cloud services, like, look at this as three different pillars. So you saw three different kinds of people who are making use of the cloud. For each of these set of users, cloud services actually offer a a, a segment of cloud services. So for example, for the last set of people, right, the system administrators, what they have is infrastructure as service, the ability for system administrators to spin up networks, the ability for system administrators to be able to add storage area. So you were storing maybe 1 terabyte of information, some application needs 10 terabytes. How do you add the rest of the 9 that you need to enhance your infrastructure? Usually there is a set of tools, APIs, etc., that are provided as infrastructure as services within these cloud service platforms, that will allow you to do exactly this, right? So you essentially on demand will be able to provision infrastructure resources. You have a way to deploy and run these infrastructure as service pieces. This is I mean, deploying networks, for example, right? These are very core pieces. You don't do this day in, day out, but there are needs that come up as your system requires to scale. So for those people, there is essentially this portion or segment of cloud services called as infrastructure as services. Now, the next one that we will talk about is platform as a service. This is essentially the development platform. Developers make use of this. So I want to create an application that is essentially rivaling, let's say, a Flipkart or an Amazon. I need to set up like some kind of a database for me to manage every single transaction, e-commerce transaction that happens. I need a database for me to provide an interface where let's say all my suppliers are able to put their catalog of what they have into the system, and I'm going to show it on my e-commerce platform, right? I need to be able to authenticate every single user who logs on to my environment, and I need a database for that. So all these different databases, these API services that I'm going to host to get to this e-commerce platform, right? Those bits and pieces that I assemble to build a application is essentially what is called as platform as a service. Usually the interactions here are from developers. They are probably saying, look, I need a MySQL database or a Postgre database, right? Or I need a Kafka server to be deployed, right? These are managed services that are provided within the PaaS or platform as a service construct for developers to make use of and be able to provision, test, deploy their software, etc. And finally, there is software as a service, which is meant for the business user or the consumer of the application, who's essentially looking at just focusing on the task at hand, right? This is the sort of like the user interface for an e-commerce site. WhatsApp, the mobile app that you see, and you type in, and then magically your friend receives the message or the picture or the video that you just shared with him or her, is essentially a application, right? And it has like a whole series of things behind the mobile app that you see, that is essentially happening through software as a service, because you are a consumer of that service. So I want you to be able to make this distinction, that the first one is more or less for system administrators. The second construct, platform as a service, is more for developers, and the third one is for the eventual users or consumers of the application, right? Software as a service, right? And I just wanted to give you a quick glimpse of this thing, right? If you go to the AWS catalog, you will see a plethora of services, right? So many different services that are available as a developer to maybe able to pick and assemble, as a infrastructure administrator to be able to pick and choose any kind of server, any kind of hardware, etc. So there are tons of services that are available. Many of them are infrastructure related, many of them are platform related, many of them are actually software as a service related as well. So I would urge you to maybe look at AWS or Azure, and look at their catalog, service catalog, and see what you see there, right? And it'll be a ton of different things that are available for you to put together, right? So with our favorite example of dinner making, essentially, like we went through this exercise, right? Cooking at home, right? Is essentially, sorry about that. Cooking at home is a bunch of things around, sorry, just, yeah. Cooking at home is essentially a bunch of things that you put together, ingredients, the way you serve, etc. All of them put together in a on-premise kitchen, right? So the blue indicates what you bring, right? Now, in a ready-to-cook scenario, essentially, you are essentially getting maybe a pack of something, an MTR pre-cooked meal, and only thing you need is a gas stove, a table, and some cutlery. Correct? The third one is the home delivery scenario, where essentially you now only need a cutlery and table. The rest of the pieces is all cooked and brought to you as a home delivery service. Finally, you could contrast this with a restaurant where you don't even need the cutlery and table. Everything is being served to you on a table that the restaurant owns, right? So this distinction is giving you a variety of different ways in which a simple task like dinner making can be done in a variety of different ways. As businesses, you have similar choices to do in terms of choosing what you manage versus what the provider manages. So if you were doing this on premise, you would essentially just sort of have everything done by yourself. If you were doing just infrastructure as a service, the servers, the virtualization, the storage, the network part goes away, but the rest of the things are being done by you. The OS, the middleware, the runtime, data, applications is all done by you. In a platform as a service concept, you're essentially like taking the runtime, middleware, and OS also out of the picture, because the developer now has all of this pre-available, pre-canned in the cloud platform itself, and you are just bringing in the data and applications, right? In the final software as a service model, you're essentially looking at everything being available as a service, and you essentially are relying completely on the provider to be able to do all this management, and you just focus on the business logic, right? Which is essentially paying the bill. In both the cases, you end up paying the bill. So I hope like this gives you a quick sense of clarity of like what are different kinds and flavors of as a service models: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service models. I'll take a small pause here. We have 3 minutes. Any questions from anyone?
Sir, I wanted to ask if we should be concerned about our privacy due to cloud computing.
Very good question. Very good question. And may I know whose question that was?
The Krishi partner.
Krishi. Right. So Krishi, like I think privacy is an extremely important thing, right? And I don't know if you're aware, but the government and many sort of regulatory authorities actually are now starting to look at that very seriously. Now, privacy is a thing like for many different applications. It may mean very different things. There are probably things like in the EU, the Europe region, there are very tough laws around privacy, right? And they are regulated. Businesses are regulated for that. So I think it's nothing to do with cloud. Essentially, it is about the application in some sense of how the applications manage privacy and security of their data. Now, when you look at all these models, whether it is infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service model, right? The as a service part, when you take bits and pieces of the services from the cloud server services like AWS or IBM Cloud or GCP, Azure, etc., they operate on what is called as a shared security model. Now, which means that they will give certain capabilities out of the box for you to adopt. Whether you adopt it or not is up to the application, up to the person who's setting the application, to what levels of security you want to apply, privacy you want to apply, is all left to the application developer and the business to ensure that they are acting in accordance with any kind of regulations, whether it is privacy, whether it is security, etc. Right? So the onus is on the person who's building this application to put in all the checks and balances that essentially will be able to take care of privacy. Now, that could mean that anytime I store data in the database as a service, an RDS or a Aurora DB or whatever technology I pick as a managed service on the cloud, I have to make sure that when it goes to the disk, it is encrypted, and only I, as the business owner or the application owner, has a key to that encrypted data. That way, if this data leaks, you're essentially leaking encrypted data that nobody can tamper with, right? Or nobody can read through and understand what is there. So the safeguards for security and privacy have to happen at the application layer where I deploy my application. And many of these cloud services do provide a lot of these constructs. It is up to me to make use of them and put it in a way that I meet the requirements of my uh, uh, industries regulation, government regulation, uh, just even software delivery principles, etc. It is all left up to the people who are building those applications. I hope that answered your question.
Yes.
Right, so we as application builders and users of platform as a service and infrastructure as a service are completely responsible for this data. So we are talking about these two pieces here, correct? And absolutely, as developers, it is our utmost responsibility to make sure that we manage this data very well. We don't leave anything leaking out to the internet. We don't leave anything unauthenticated that is available on the internet for somebody to download. Numerous like credit card numbers, names, and phone numbers, etc. Those are completely the responsibility of the people who are building those applications. All right. So we will move on. I had a quick summary. Uh, if we look at all the things that we covered, right? Essentially, what we have talked about is that very large amounts of computing resources and software services are available through the internet across many different data centers and region of the world, right? This is what cloud computing gives us. It gives us instant and almost unlimited scalability, right? It is completely elastic. So you can scale up, you can also scale down, right? If the business is not doing very well, I don't want to spend that money, that much more money on the infrastructure. I want it to be scaling down as well, right? So elasticity means that economies of scale, that the compute available is very very cheap, because when these companies deploy it in vast and massive scales, the costs go down, right? So that's basically where the economies of scale comes from. And finally, it lets you focus as a business or a person who's trying to put together an innovative idea out. Lets you focus on what you want to achieve, what you do best, and sort of leave the rest to the people who do this very well of what the cloud gives us. Now, we also talked about different kinds of cloud services and deployment models, and also about how we are changing the way we build and consume software, which was the previous slide, where we looked at how from self-managed to infrastructure only to platform to SaaS as a service. We have been able to change the way we build and consume software. So with that, I think I am at the end of the session. I can take some more questions if there are any other questions, but I'm a little cognizant of time because I probably took 5 minutes more. So if you guys have any questions, I'm very happy to answer them.
Sir, I wanted to ask that sometimes it happens that some websites they go down, their main server goes down, so they become unavailable for usage by the users. So could you explain what happens in layman terms in the
Yeah,
main server?
yeah, 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 yeah. So remember this slide deck that I had shown. I'm just going to retrace my way back, right? So let's imagine this situation. This first picture that I showed you tells you the story. And this is a very primitive way of setting up an application. So if you were to set up a small application today, right, on, let's say, one of these cloud services, you've essentially got to create at least this portion of the blue box, right? You will need a presentation layer, you will need a backend, you'll need storage. Maybe you have an external integration, or maybe you don't have an external integration. So this is still optional. This purple part is still optional. But typically you will have these three layers: the front end, back end, and storage. Correct? Now imagine that this is how you set up your infrastructure. And then what ended up happening is that, let's say you were doing a database upgrade on your storage, right? Uh, could
Yes, sir.
be it could be a database in a MySQL database, etc. And while you were doing the upgrade, the storage got corrupted. It's very likely, and it happens all the time, right? You're doing just a very simple upgrade. MySQL released a new version, and you just wanted to upgrade. You wanted to make use of that capability. And what ended up happening is this database would not even come up. Now, what do? This entire business that you set up has gone for a toss, right? So the problem is you don't have adequate redundancy. And that is exactly what the second picture was trying to do. So, and it is not about just a database upgrade, etc. Sometimes disks fail, right? At the end of the day, behind the scenes, everything is hardware, right?
Yes, sir.
So disks fail, and it would have happened to you on your laptop. It exactly the same way it happens on servers as well. This is not like magical clouds where everything runs as usual. The reason they are able to do all of this is because they order in bulk. They do many things in a manner that it is cost efficient. That doesn't mean that there is guarantees against failures. Correct. So a storage tier that was purchased yesterday, within a week, if you don't use it properly, or there were some defects in the way the storage was built, you will see failures. At the end of the day, these are mechanical devices. They have a lifespan, right? So if you did not design for redundancy, if you did not design for this availability thing that we just spoke about in one of the subsequent slides, where we said, oh, you can distribute this across regions. Sometimes disasters happen. So maybe 4 years back, there was a flood in Chennai, and guess what? I mean, in one of the biggest data centers in Chennai, the water seeped through. If water seeps through into the data centers, you've got to shut things off. These are electrical devices. I mean, you have to manage that risk, and you have to shut things off. If you shut things off, the entire Chennai zone is just blacked out. Not only that, like sometimes these cables, internet cables that pass through the seas, right? They get cut for whatever reason. I mean, somebody sabotages them. Uh, Zones or entire countries can have like internet just going off, like without a blip. But you have a global business to run, right? So if the internet connectivity to India is lost, but majority of your customers are in US, you want business to still happen, right? You can't just say that, oh, there is an excuse that like, look, the internet under the sea cable for India just had developed a cut, and internet is no longer flowing. Till somebody repairs it, you've got your business to run. So unless you design for such eventualities and faults, right, you will get into the situation where things become very difficult for you to sustain, because any small thing that happens with faults essentially hampers availability.